resend that correct link.
No, it is sent.
The one that they sent wasn't working. I told them last night.
No, it is working now, Mataji.
Now it is.
And they sent it. They already sent it.
I tried it yesterday.
No, she already sent it and it's working fine. Yeah.
Right.
See, we have already 11
Okay,
people.
yes, it's working.
11 people who's already working. Yeah. Go ahead, read, Prabhu. Sorry.
The Srila Prabhupada allowed himself to be ordered by Lord Chaitanya.
Probably your camera's on and it's just going like whirling around.
Srila Prabhupada had deferred the lessons in dying in favor of giving his disciples an unparalleled opportunity to serve him in pure and simple love. And he allowed this not only for a few, but for whoever came to Vrindavan. Many came, and all were allowed to enter Srila Prabhupada's room, besides his body, and sit with him as long as they liked, day and night, chanting the holy name for his pleasure. Srila Prabhupada also recommenced his translating, and this was done openly. Whereas previously he had always worked in solitude, he now encouraged all devotees to come as he lay in bed, dictating his Bhaktivedanta purports. He was giving himself completely and declaring it also, telling the devotees present, "Never leave me, and I cannot live without your company." They had asked him to stay, and he had agreed, consigning himself completely to their care. Those who were blessed to have this service felt themselves passing over all barriers of reluctance to serve, as well as all barriers of material desire. By intimately serving Srila Prabhupada, they felt the strength of complete surrender and sensed that this would sustain them always, even when Srila Prabhupada eventually did depart from the world. Prabhupada also continued speaking, as he had in recent months, about being unafraid of death and being fixed in transcendental knowledge. When receiving a presentation of his books, recently printed in Portuguese by Vridananda Goswami, Prabhupada encouraged him and said, "This is life. The material world is just bones. The bones are not our real life. Our real concern is the living force. The bones may remain or go. It doesn't matter. The real life is sustaining the bones. There is even a history that there was a rishi who had only bones. So there is a science by which you can sustain life by only bones. Hiranyakashipu did it. You are also doing it, Srila Prabhupada, Lord Krishna said. So take care of the bones as long as possible, said Prabhupada. But the real life is here. Always remember that. The material world means we are simply all protecting bones and flesh together, but they have no knowledge of what they are. And when Atreya Rishi visited Srila Prabhupada and asked that he visit Tehran, Prabhupada said that he was ready to go, but now you have to take a bundle of bones. These were, of course, the same themes that Prabhupada had always taught, the same themes that were in his books, but the lessons were more poignant and striking when Prabhupada applied them to his own situation. More than one devotee compared Prabhupada to Bhishma, who gave important instructions in his last days. As Bhishma felt no pain and delivered learned and loving discourses even from his bed of arrows, and as Bhishma determined by his own will the time of his departure from the world, so Srila Prabhupada spent his last days oblivious to his physical condition, defying death and instructing his spiritually innocent sons. But Prabhupada's sons could no longer stand by and simply hear philosophical lessons. Prabhupada had accepted their affection when they had cried for him to stay with them, and now they wanted to express that affection in the only world they understood, a world with Srila Prabhupada living and talking with them, laughing or reprimanding them as he liked. They wanted him to eat and drink and become physically strong again. But again, Srila Prabhupada seemed to change, and he began refusing food and drink. He had postponed his passing away to exchange lovingly with his disciples, and yet, at the same time, by refusing to eat or drink, he was showing his preference for passing away. He admitted, when pressed, that it was an impossible course of action to live without food or drink. Nor did he expect or want miracles. If he was to get better, it would be by taking nourishment. But for reasons of his own, he would not eat. He said recovery was material and he didn't want it. He kept closely in tune with the will of Krishna, allowing the holy name to sustain him. The doctors who came were often puzzled, but those who were Vaishnavas understood and respected his prerogative. Prabhupada's servants made anxiety-filled attempts to induce Prabhupada to take regular treatment, but Prabhupada preferred to take only Kirtan and Bhagavatam, while at the same time sustaining a willingness to live. He empathized with his disciples' anxiety and patiently explained the puzzling situation they were in. He wanted their care and he allowed them to try and treat him, knowing that it was bringing them more and more into a surrender of love, but gradually it became more clear that Krishna's will was indicating Prabhupada's departure. Srila Prabhupada Bhavananda quotes, always working on the assumption that Prabhupada could stay if he wanted. Your presence on this planet is the only thing that's keeping the onslaught of the Kali Yuga from really taking effect. We have no idea what will happen if you leave. It is not in my hands, said Srila Prabhupada with perfect clarity of consciousness. Krishna Balaram. Srila Prabhupada always spoke clearly, logically, and with complete devotion to Krishna. Up until the last, he dealt with practical matters, forming a Bhaktivedanta Swami Charity Trust for reconstructing ancient temples in Bengal and arranging final details regarding ISKCON properties and monies. Through all dealings, he stayed always alert, and he absorbed himself in Kirtan and Bhagavatam. But it became obvious to his disciples that despite his promise, he was again moving inevitably towards giving the final lesson. He was teaching that love was beyond death, that his disciples' love could call the spiritual master back to the world to stay, and that a pure devotee has the ability to stay in the world beyond his allotted time. Meanwhile, however, he was progressing steadily to the final point. The devotees didn't feel angry with him or cheated that he was doing so. He had told them that he had free will given by Krishna, and they also, by their free will, had asked him to stay, and he had agreed, but they knew he was not obliged. If, despite their prayers, Lord Krishna was telling Srila Prabhupada that he should come back home, back to Godhead, what could they do but accept? If Srila Prabhupada was accepting, then they would accept also. Nothing, however, could change the fact of their surrender of love. It had now become a solid path that could not be vanquished by any material changes. They had passed the test of eternal loving service, and that could not be taken away by death. Up until the end, there were interludes of sweetness, as well as disciples of Prabhupada, displays of Prabhupada's indomitable mood of fighting for Krishna. One day, Prabhupada's sister, Pishima, arrived unexpectedly, and Prabhupada asked her to cook khichdi. At that time, Kirtanananda was trying to put Prabhupada on the road to recovery by gradually increasing his liquids. And Kirtanananda and the other devotees opposed the idea of his suddenly eating solid foods, but Srila Prabhupada insisted. It doesn't matter whether what she cooks does good to me or bad, says Srila Prabhupada. She is a Vaishnavi. It will be good for me. He then began speaking in an extremely humble way. Probably I became a little puffed up because of my opulence and success, he said. Now God has shattered that pride. If you don't have your body, what is there to be puffed up about? Bhakti Srila Swami protested. Srila Prabhupada, whatever you have done for Krishna. That may be, but in this world, unknowingly you commit offenses. When Pishima heard this, she exclaimed, No, he never committed any offense. You cannot ever commit offenses, said Bhakti Charu. You are God's very dear one. How can you commit offense? I'm a little temperamental, says Srila Prabhupada. I used to use words like rascal and so on. I never compromised. They used to call it a club in one hand and a Bhagavatam in the other. That is how I preach. Anyway, make arrangements for my sister. There were also visits from Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers. And again, Prabhupada asked forgiveness for his offenses. One time, Niskinchana Krishnadas Babaji, Kuri Maharaj, Ashram Maharaj, Ananda Prabhu, Purushottama Brahmachari, and about 20 others came and sat next to Prabhupada's bed. He was resting when they arrived, and they joined the kirtan until he awoke. When he saw them, he asked to be raised up. Sitting in the center of his bed with his godbrothers all around, he addressed them. All over the world, there is a beautiful field to preach Krishna consciousness, he said. I didn't care whether I would be successful or not. People are willing to take. They are all taking also. If we preach together, the saying of Mahaprabhu, Priti Viti, will come true. We have everything. Spread the holy name and distribute prasada. There is a beautiful field. In Africa, in Russia, everywhere they're accepting. When Prabhupada began asking his godbrothers to forgive him, they protested. You are the eternal leader, one of them asserted. You rule over us, guide us, and chastise us. Forgive all my offenses, Prabhupada repeated. I became proud of all my opulence. No, said Puri Maharaj, you never became proud. When you started preaching, opulence and success followed you. That was the blessing of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sri Krishna. There cannot be any question of your being offensive. When Srila Prabhupada presented himself as Mahapatita, greatly fallen, Puri Maharaj did not accept it. You have saved millions of people around the world, he said. Therefore, there is no question of offenses. But you should be called Mahapatitapada, the great savior of the fallen. Prabhupada's disciples regarded Prabhupada's asking for his godbrother's forgiveness as a manifestation of his humility, but they were also puzzled. Certainly, Prabhupada's godbrothers were sincere in saying Prabhupada had committed no offense. Whatever he had done for Krishna. But Srila Prabhupada was also sincere in asking for forgiveness. That was the beautiful gem of his humility, to ask everyone for forgiveness. For the purpose of preaching, displaying this gem had not always been the most effective way to spread the merciful teachings of Lord Krishna in every town and village. But now it could be displayed. In London and now in Vrindavan, Prabhupada was showing his disciples extra affection and gratitude without the reprimands usually necessary in training disciples. This attitude of complete humility was a symptom of the highest stage of devotional life. Srila Prabhupada had explained in his books that the Madhyama Adhikari, the second-class devotee, makes distinctions between the devotees, the innocent non-devotees, and the demons, whereas the Mahabhagavat, or first-class devotee, sees everyone except himself as a servant of God. Sometimes, however, the Mahabhagavat desires to come down from the first-class platform to the second-class platform just to take up the most compassionate service of preaching Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada's disciples had all read of the Mahabhagavat stage in the scriptures, and now they were seeing it fully displayed, as Prabhupada referred to himself as the most fallen and asked for everyone's forgiveness. Srila Prabhupada had heard of the program of his disciple, Lokanath Swami, who was taking a small group of men on a bullock cart and preaching in villages throughout India. Lokanath had told Srila Prabhupada how, in the course of their travels, they had recently visited tirthas such as Badarikashram and Bhim Kapur. Srila Prabhupada was enlivened to hear this, and he then evolved a transcendental desire to go himself on a cart pulled by bullocks to circumambulate the area of Vrindavan. Tamal Krishna and Bhavananda, who were serving Prabhupada with increased intimacy, felt themselves unable to support Srila Prabhupada in his desire, since they thought his fragile body could not survive such rough treatment on the roads. But Srila Prabhupada reasoned that dying on parikram is glorious, and he asked them to take him. A controversy developed among the devotees, as some said Prabhupada's will to go on parikram should be immediately honored as an order from the spiritual master. He wanted it, and it should not be denied. The doctor, however, assured them that Srila Prabhupada's body would not survive the jostling of the cart. The many devotees who crowded around Srila Prabhupada's bed held different opinions, and Prabhupada could see this. Following his request, however, Lokanath went out and hired a cart with bullocks and prepared it for the ride. Lokanath and Hamsaduta suggested that the parikram could go to the city of Vrindavan or visit the 7 main temples of the Goswamis. But then they said that since the next day was Govardhan Puja, Prabhupada could go to Govardhan Hill. Tamal Krishna, Bhavananda, and Bhakti Charu, however, protested adamantly against the parikram. One day experiment, Prabhupada said, it is for one day. Rest assured, I will not die in one day. He liked the idea of going to Govardhan, and And we shall make our cooking there, he said. Lokanath Swami, he assured them, was experienced. Make very good picnic, he said. After discussing back and forth, the devotees finally decided that early the next morning, they would take Srila Prabhupada in a pullet cart to Govardhan. The majority of the devotees then left Srila Prabhupada alone for the night. Later that night, Srila Prabhupada received a visit from his Kinchana Krishnadas Babaji, who sat with Srila Prabhupada chanting and sometimes speaking in Bengali. Suddenly, Tamal Krishna and Bhavananda came to Prabhupada's bedside. They were in tears and beside themselves with anxiety. Prabhupada understood. You request me not to go? He asked. Well, Srila Prabhupada said, Tamal Krishna, I'll tell you, I'm getting so upset sitting in the room upstairs. I was walking around. Two of the devotees told me that this road is so bad that if you go on this road, you're going to be jolted back and forth. The road is terrible. I just can't understand, Srila Prabhupada, why it has to be tomorrow that we have to go. Of anybody that wants you to travel, I do. But why do we have to go when you're in this condition? I can't understand it. Why are we throwing everything?
Hare Krishna devotees. Now we're going to start the worship of Srila Prabhupada. Okay. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhu, should we do? Let's see, where is it? Okay. Okay, dear devotees, please repeat after me. We're going to do the Pushpanjali and then we'll do this one. Om Ajnanatimidandhasya
Om Ajnanatimidandhasya
Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurummilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadabhiyam Dadati Swapadantikam वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्री राधा कृष्ण पादान सहगण ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितांश्च नमा ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण प्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे नमः ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण प्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति सिद्धांत सारस्वती इति नामिने श्री वार्षभानवी देवी दायिताय कृपाब्धे कृष्ण संबंध विज्ञान दायिने प्रभवे नमः माधुरोज्वल प्रेमाढ्याय श्री रूपानुग भक्तिदा श्री गौर करुणा शक्ति विग्रहाय नमोस्तुते नमस्ते गौरवाणी श्री मूर्तये दीनतारिणे रूपानुग विरुद्धाप सिद्धांत ध्वंतहारिणे नमो गौर किशोराय साक्षात वैराग्य मूर्तये विप्रलंबर सांभोदे पादांबुजायते नमः नमो भक्ति विनोदाय सच्चिदानंद नामिने गौर शक्ति स्वरूपाय रूपानुगवरायते गौराविर्भाव भूमिस्त्वं निर्देष्टा सज्जन प्रिया वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्री जगन्नाथाय ते नमः वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमो महावदन्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नाम्ने गौरत्युषे नमः पंचतत्वात्मकं कृष्णं भक्त रूप स्वरूपकं भक्तावतारं भक्ताख्यं नमामि भक्त शक्तिकं। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते जयतां सुरतो पंगोर मम मंद मतेर्गति मत सर्वस्व पादां भोजो राधा मदन मोहनो दिव्याद्वृंदारण्य कल्पद्रुमदः श्रीमद्रत्नागार सिंहासनस्थो Srimad Radha Srila Govinda Devo Preshtalibhi Sevyamano Smarami Sriman Rasarsarambi Vamshi Vata Tatastitha Karshan Venu Sunair Gopir Gopinatha Shriyastunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we'll chant Srila Prabhupada from the press 3 times and then we'll offer the Pushpanjali. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prasarine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Esha Pushpanjali Shri Radha Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Esha Pushpanjali Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Nirvishesh Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Esha Pushpanjali Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Vande Guru Sri Charanarvindam. Ya Shri Radha Gopala ki jai, Shri Radha Gopala ki jai, Shri Gauranga ki jai. You're going to have just hold on.
Namamishwaram Sachidanandarupa Rasat Kundalam Gokule Vrajamani
Karambodhayugmena Shakantaneka Muhashasakam Patirekam Kakanta Sitagabandha